Hello, everyone, and welcome to Guildmaster Gaming. This time around, we've got director uh, Joe Bandelli. Now, I had the opportunity of seeing Joe's film The Sequence while at FilmQuest this year, 2025. But we're going to let Joe, please tell us, what is your short film about?
Well, thank you for having me, first off. I appreciate it. And yeah, the sequence is basically it's about a mother who has a terrifying nightmare that she kills her entire family. And so she wakes up from this horrifying dream and she goes about her day. And as the day progresses, bits and pieces of her dream sequence start to play out in real time. So she basically does everything she can possibly do to make sure that her dream does not become a reality.
Okay. Now, you've been involved in some feature films in the past, and so do you see that this as a story all within itself, or is it something that you can expand out on that you're looking at as turning into a feature?
Yeah, so the original concept for this, our writer and producer Brian Leprosino, he came to me and we met, and he basically had this as like a proof of concept. This was a dream that he had, and it was a very vivid dream. And he basically has been trying to get it off the ground for the last 5 years. And so we met in early 2024, and the whole concept was, hey, we have a bigger picture idea here. So he wrote the short. He brought me on to direct it. We put it together. He was so happy with how things went. And so now we are in the process of developing the feature. So myself, him, and another writer, Nick Landa, the three of us are writing the feature-length version of the sequence right now and hope that we can get to tell that story at some point.
Okay. So I'm thinking, are you planning on kind of advancing it beyond this story? Because I mean,
Correct.
it seemed, the
Yeah.
story of
Yeah.
the nightmare was kind of like all right there.
Right. And I think what we wouldn't want to do and what I don't think works well, I think a lot of times when people make short films, they make short form versions of what their feature length would be. So when you see the feature, it's the exact same thing that you saw in the short, but just bigger. That's not what we would do. I think what we would do is we'd probably still have the same characters. But I mean, we definitely would have the same characters because we have at least a few of the cast that we had in the short art would be attached for the feature. But the goal is to take the essence of what the movie's about. And, there's themes in the movie about like parenting, communication, talking to your kids, grief, a lot of those things that I think are bigger picture themes that would go into the larger format. I think you would expect to see some of the things. There's some technical things in the movie, like a lazy Susan shot and elements like that, that I think we're going to try to actually expand on and go bigger with that. But ultimately, the dream sequence and trying to put an end to something that took place in your nightmare is the essence of what the feature would be. It just wouldn't play out the exact way that you saw it in the short.
Okay, now you touched on two things I wanted to get on because there are some real technical shots and editing sequencing in the film.
Yep.
So, and there's also about some of your casts that you had that I thought was kind of interesting that from what I've done before, I wanted to touch on. But let's first go with your expertise area of the technical shots that you were doing. You
Sure.
talked about the Lazy Susan shot. Uh,
Yep.
that's the one that just kind of shows everybody around the table.
Yep.
I remember hearing at the festival that there was some talk about this in the
Oh, good.
Q&A. And so, can you tell a little bit more about just how that shot came into being? Because I think it is an interesting story for people to think about when they're making films.
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and I've been making movies for a very long time. I'm very lucky and very grateful. I've been producing the Hell House LLC franchise for the last 10 years. And I've directed a few things here and there, but the one thing that I've noticed, and more along the lines of like when I do step into the director's chair, there's always two elements of what really catches me and makes me want, like, really invested. First and foremost is a really good story. Like, I think it has to be something that I really can sink my teeth in and something that has a theme that I can relate to and something that I can, hopefully get out there so that people can understand there's a bigger picture than just what's happening on screen. And then the second thing is some type of technical challenge or something that isn't just straightforward A to B shooting. We just did a festival run and I saw a lot of fantastic films, but that was the one thing that set our film apart from a lot of the other films was this technically challenging shot. And so for that shot specifically, Brian actually wrote that shot into the script. And so he had it twice in the movie. He actually had it in the nightmare sequence and he had it in the dream, in the real life sequence at the end of the movie. And I remember kind of pitching to him because when our cinematographer was like blown away, he's like, "We're gonna get a remote head." He's like, "We're gonna crush this." And I was like, "Listen," I was like, "I need everyone to make sure they understand like the technical challenges are us rehearsing it and getting it down." But on the day of the actual shoot, like we're not fortunate enough to have enough money to do rehearsal days with our cast. So everything that we're doing with the cast is going to be on site. And now we're dealing with people and performances. So it's not just the technical element, it's the creative element. You're dealing with a child actor and you're dealing with special effects, vomit and blood. And so there's a lot of things taking place in this whole thing. So for me, that was just a big challenge. I think the biggest thing for me that I sort of sunk my teeth into was when I spoke with Brian and I said, "Hey, listen, I don't think we should do two of these." I was always under the impression that if we did that shot in the nightmare, as soon as we get to real life, as soon as the camera started moving that same way, it didn't matter what had happened, everyone would know what's going to happen. And so my whole thing was, I want to do a shot in the nightmare sequence that's a little strange and kind of like makes our character seem, I guess, Jack Nicholson Joker-esque with this crazy ass smile on her face and have this world of like everything is normal. And as you get closer and closer to her, everything starts getting chaotic until the last moments of it. And so for me, it was like, if I can put a stamp on the nightmare and have something be interesting in the nightmare that kind of, brings some terror to the audience, by the time we get to that Lazy Susan shot, people are going to be like, whoa, this is different. Like I'm seeing something unique here. And then obviously as that thing ramps up and plays out, you get to see hopefully the creative elements of what went into the writing, the directing, the acting, the shooting, and so on and so forth.
Now, on the other side of this, on the technical stuff, the kind of the storytelling aspect, the editing of putting together the the aspects of how the throughout the film things kind of kept changing
Mhm.
uh, in terms of timeline that you had to go back. How difficult was that to make sure that those elements all came together to tell the story in the way you wanted to?
So it wasn't as challenging as you would think because we had a long script. I remember when Brian gave me the first draft of the short, it was 25 pages long. And I remember saying to him, like, "Hey man, like I'm just letting you know, like I'm gonna cut a lot of this. Like if I shoot the normal standard of page to minute, this is gonna be a 25-minute short. And I just don't think 25-minute shorts play well in festivals. I know they exist, and I know there are a lot of really great ones out there, but for me, it's always been let's get it under sub 15. I think that's kind of a happy medium. And so when we went into it, Brian wrote the dream sequence specifically linearly. So I remember saying like, "Hey, let's, and I'm a writer director as well. So when I take on someone else's writing, I try not to just come in and be like, no, no, no. Like I really want to collaborate and work with people and try to get an understanding. And since Brian dreamt a lot of this, I wanted to know what the visuals were that what he was seeing, and I wanted to try to be like truthful to that and honor that in a way. And so when he said he wanted the dream sequence to be linearly, I had an idea, but I was like, "Hey, like I think I can save us some money and some time if we don't do this." And he was like, "No, I really want you to do it this way." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do it this way." But I always had this backup plan in the back of my mind where I knew, so I'm not a big experimental film person. Like I don't love experimental films. And I sort of when we did our first rough cut, my editor Nick Landa and I, when we did our rough cut, it wasn't working. The middle and end were great, but the beginning just wasn't working. And we showed it to Brian and our other producer Chris, and they were like, "Something's off." And I was like, "Can you give us a couple days?" I'm like, "I know what to do." And so I went back to Nick and I was like, "Listen," I was like, "Dreams are fucked up. Like dreams are all over the place. Like dreams are never like you're at point A and point B and point C. I mean, if we've learned anything from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, like you could be at the beach one day and turn and you're in a boiler room." And so that's kind of the concept that I went into it. And so I sort of told Nick, like, "Hey, let's chop this thing up almost to the point where we're going to use the rhythmic sounds." Because I remember Brian had a couple like ticking, like the clock ticking and a few different things in the script. And I asked him for each section to pick and let's put a specific sound element. So if we're doing the kitchen, you have the burner turning on. If you're doing the outside, you have the snips of the. So I kind of had him put that into the script, knowing that when we got into editing, I was going to cut around the sound design as opposed to cutting around the visuals. And when Nick and I started jumping in there, we just started cutting all over the place and kind of going in sort of this like crazy ass, like surreal feeling. And I remember sitting there and watching it and being like, if you're watching this for the first time, this almost feels like you're watching an experimental film. And then boom, you're immediately thrown into this day and the rest of the film is told linearly. And so that was kind of my approach. And I showed it to Brian again, and Brian was like, this is exactly what he's like, this is what I felt my nightmare was like. And I was like, great. So mission accomplished.
So you cremated a nightmare from his nightmare for the rest of us. Uh,
Correct.
so, you said that this all came from his dream, his nightmare. But what was maybe some of your earlier inspiration from movies that you might have drawn on to pull this together?
Yeah, so when you have such a small amount of time to shoot certain things, some things go exactly the way you want, some things don't. I think originally, like there were films like The Babadook, Lamb, and Lodge were like the movies that, like, for the visual look of it, that were kind of inspirations. Obviously, The Babadook became a little bit more challenging because a lot of the scares and a lot of the things that take place in that movie take place at night, and we were trying to sort of have this whole dream sequence and have everything take place during the day. That's something I learned from my partner on the Hell House franchise is, if you can make scares in the daytime, like imagine what could happen at nighttime. And I think if you can make an audience feel scared or terrified in the day, like it's only going to get worse at night. So that was kind of like the thinking going into that. And I think, yeah, I feel like really I just wanted something that was visually appealing, and I really wanted an opportunity because I know a lot of times, especially when you do things that are technically challenging and you have a lot of special effects, you don't get an opportunity to actually let the actors act. And I knew we had an awesome cast, and like I was able to get people that I really like Katie Parker, someone that I wanted to work with so badly. And I remember she was like at the top of my list for my like dream sequence. Or for my like dream of what I can get for this. And when I found out we got her, I was like, holy shit, like this is awesome. So I wanted to make sure that on set we had flexibility so that if Katie and I are working through something, or if any of the other cast are working through something, we could play a little and kind of find some new things in there. And that's kind of the approach that I took going into it.
Well, I thank you for that segue because I have Katie down in my notes.
You're welcome.
And the reason why it's an actor that I think people will recognize from some of her earlier work on television and that and some of the horror franchises. So I can see the reason why to do there. But in case I don't know if you knew this or not, but she was in a feature that was showcased
Belgium,
at Film
right?
Fest, the Beltham. So
Yep.
so if people kind of do that, that's a great little thing, to kind of see. So it sounds like you already mentioned it was great to work with her and her abilities and also knowing the genre.
Yeah, and so Katie's obviously had a lot of experience. She's worked with Mike Flanagan a lot on a lot of shows like The Haunting of Hill House and Blind Manor and Fall of the House of Usher. The thing that what surprised me about Katie is Katie's a leading lady, and I don't think Katie has gotten the opportunities that she should have for the talent that she has. And so working with her was easy. I think a lot of times when you're working with someone new, there's always the balance of trust, and there's always sometimes I'm going to ask you things and sometimes they may not make sense. And I think with Katie, I was really, really open what I wanted to do from the start of it. And Katie, she sort of told me like, hey, listen, I like to work musically. And I was like, great, I have a playlist of things that I've been thinking about as I've been going through this. Let me share it with you. And so that kind of like gave her a little bit of inspiration. And I think by the time we got to set, I think for the most part, I think she got what I was trying to do with her. But there were a couple times, like there's a scene in the movie where she's looking down and there's a gun in a gun case and she starts crying. And it's one of the most beautiful, it's such a simple shot, but it's one of the most beautiful shots in the movie. And I remember we were doing it and I didn't know if I wanted that type of emotion. And I was like, I'm not sure what to do here. She's like, you want me to just cry? She's like, let me just take a stab at crying. And I was like, yeah, give it a shot. And like that's what got in the film. So there was like moments like that where it's like something was working or wasn't working. We are trying to figure it out. And it's like a lot of times I think directors, especially when they're working with higher caliber talent or people that have had a lot of experience, you tend to overthink things and you tend to try to overcomplicate things as opposed to just being direct. And Katie opened up that door for me to be very direct with her. And then the rest of the cast was incredible. The rest of the cast just filled in, and everyone. There was no egos on this set. It was a bunch of people that like really enjoyed a script and really thought that we can tell something kind of terrifying for an audience. And I think I couldn't have been happier with them as well as with my crew. My crew was phenomenal. I don't think the amount of stuff that we shot in the amount of time, I wouldn't have been able to do this with any other crew.
Yeah, and I didn't really get into the others because Katie was kind of our target there, but you do have the cast, like you're saying, they also have a lot of experience in television doing these different series as lower parts. So you can tell that there's this cohesion that came together in this story. That's
Absolutely.
really kind of nice. And also to compliment you, I mean, in some of your past experience, my audience, you know, they see these things, but they don't realize all the times who's behind the camera or behind the scenes, kind of pulling it together. Because you were involved in the production of Another Cabin in the Woods in
Yep.
last year, and also the D&D television special, doing the
Mhm.
interview with all the people from, that film that, as you can guess, Guildmaster Gaming pulls in a lot of gaming people.
I could imagine. Yeah, no, I have a stint of live production background, so I did a bunch of stuff for D&D and a lot of movie premieres when around the time that that film came out.
Yeah, I bet that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about your cast, your crew. So let's kind of jump in more to who Joe is.
Yeah.
So we got about this film, but let me ask you, kind of going back in time, what was what was the turning point in your life, or what movie, what was it that you went, I want to become a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been performing. I was in sketch comedy groups. I was in theater. I used to do a lot growing up, and I always kind of like film was always the thing that I was so interested in. Movies just captivated me, and movies were an escape from whatever you were feeling, whether it was a good day, a bad day, whatever. You could escape and go enjoy this experience. So movies have always been a huge part of my life, and I think what I've gone through is not to say I've said this numerous times before, and I don't mean to shit on my family. But my family, I come from a background where my family loves the arts and are big theater people and movies, but no one is in the arts. So the thought of having someone in your family go do something when you have lawyers, when you have teachers, when you have insurance salesmen, like that kind of stuff, it was sort of far-fetched. It's, don't do that. You're never going to be, Brad Pitt, like that kind of thing. And so I always had this hesitancy of like, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I, going back and forth. And Dumb and Dumber was one of the first movies that I've ever saw, and then immediately followed by See No Evil, Hear No Evil with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder that I saw and made me giggle. And I was like, holy shit, like people look at these movies like Dumb and Dumber, for instance, and they're like, what a stupid movie. And it's like, no, it takes a really intelligent person to write a movie like that that's so translatable for such a massive audience to get that comedic timing. And then obviously having, Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels in it. But so those movies were sort of like the I know I want to be a filmmaker. It was really a book that kind of got me on the horror and the like murder mystery kind of track. Was I think I was in seventh grade and I read Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, and that kind of just like changed everything for me. One of my friends was in my office the other day and he's looking on the shelf over here. I have like 40 different versions of And Then There Were None. And I'm not sure if you ever saw the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, how he always has to buy another version of Catcher in the Rye. It's kind of the same way because it's just been this thing of like this simple story that like has 10 people that go to an island and then there's so much underneath and like you never know who the killer is and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what really got the wheels spinning. And I was working in finance and I was pursuing a law enforcement career in the federal government, and I hit kind of this bump where sort of what Paul Dano's character happens to him in Little Miss Sunshine, which is I couldn't pursue it any further because of my colorblindness. And so that was one of the things that kind of hit me really hard. And to answer the long-winded answer to your question is, while that was happening was around the time Christopher Nolan was making The Dark Knight. And I remember being like, you know what? I've never seen Brokeback Mountain. And I just remember being like, I don't think I'd be interested in this type of movie. And I went and I watched it, and I was so blown away by it. And I was so captivated at like a story of love, but not something that I knew, something that was different to me. And I was so like impressed by it. And I thought it was such a great sense of storytelling. And I think that moment was the moment where I said, you know what, screw this. I'm never going to let another single person tell me what I can and can't do. I'm literally going to quit my job, take every single dollar that I put into a 401k, clear it out, pay whatever fines and penalties I need to pay for taking this out early, and go to film school. And that's what I did, and I've been on the path ever since.
Okay, kind of a personal question I got to ask, and then there was none. Which do you consider as your favorite adaptation?
Whew. Are you talking about movies?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, like that's a movie that I would love to direct. That's a movie that I would love to do my version of it because I think There's a one, I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays Tyrion Lannister, or Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones, he plays Justice Wargrave in the movie. It came out in the 80s. That's probably the closest one, but I feel like all of them, they don't really do a fantastic job of throwing misdirections. Like it's almost very obvious by the time the second or third person's killed who the killer is. Now, granted, I know who the killer is, and it's kind of hard if you're going to adapt something to change the killer. But I feel like that's one of those ones that like there's been so many different adaptations that none of them have like there's not like for instance, I would love to remake Clue, but I think Clue is incredible. Like I don't think I would ever try to recreate Tim Curry's Wadsworth because you can't. Like it's just one of those performances that just blows you away. But with And Then There Were None, I feel like I can kind of make some changes and adjustments to all of the characters and tell a better version of it. That's me being, I guess, my conceited
No,
cocky.
I just had to ask because I remember when I was in ninth grade for Halloween, they showed us 10 Little Indians.
Oh yeah.
So, and that was always one that kind of stuck with me of how it played out. But
Yeah.
no, that's some great stuff. So you've already answered one of my questions. I guess, do you have any other dream projects besides doing your own adaptation of Agatha Christie's book?
Yeah, so I really, really, really am an original content guy. And I really like the thing that I find, the thing that's been the most challenging for me is I directed the movie Another Cabin in the Woods movie, which is a spoof. And it's kind of a mock on the, Cabin in the Woods genre. And so I know people that saw the sequence and were like, whoa, Joe did that? And I think one of the things, and like, sure, I could take that as a negative, but I took it as a positive. And I think a lot of times, especially in this industry, and like I've had conversations with Katie about this. I've had conversations with so many other filmmakers, even my partner on the Hell House franchise. When you make something and you do a good job at something, this industry kind of has a way of making sure that you just continue to do that same thing. Like I was watching the Goosebumps adaptation, the one that just came out last year, the one with David Schwimmer, and there was an episode where I was watching it and I was like, it was like almost found footage. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And at the end of it, the director was the one of the guys who did the Blair Witch Project. And I'm like, man, this guy's been probably trying to get out of found footage for the last 3 decades. And all they're like is like, we got a found footage idea. Let's get this guy to do it. And it's like the thing that I've had the biggest challenge is I grew up watching action and Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Van Damme. I grew up watching Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, the Peter Sellers in the Pink Panther movies, and then Jim Carrey. I grew up watching Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and love anything John Carpenter does and Wes Craven does. I grew up in this world where like it wasn't just horror or it wasn't just comedy. I think my personal taste is in comedy and in horror. But the thing is I think for me, I like telling stories that are really dark and really twisted, like the sequence. But I also like telling stories that sort of point the lens inward and like make fun of the fact that this is something that we're scared of, or this is something that we kind of like, so to answer your question, it's hard because I have a few stories and things that I'm trying to get off the ground, like the feature-length version of the sequence that are really dark and really twisted. I also have this like spoof called Corpse Creek, which is like a masked killer whodunit spoof. And I'm like, that movie's so funny, and I really want to tell that story. But it's one of those things where like it's hard in this industry because if you make something that's good, people want you to keep making that same thing. And I would prefer to be able to do different things and showcase that I can actually flex other muscles and tell multiple stories, not just the same story over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's something that all artistic talents take in.
Yep.
I know in writing, it's once you write in one genre, they're like, oh, you got to keep writing that genre. And so many people, they take a pen name to
Right.
write in a different genre.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay.
It's funny. I was talking with one of my writing partners, and he's not a genre guy, but he's worked on 4 projects with me, and they're the 4 projects that are probably the biggest projects that he's worked on. And he's like, I'm not a genre guy. And I was like, I got news for you. I'm like, you kind of are. I'm like, people know you as a genre guy. I'm like, you may not be a genre guy, but that's what people think you are, and that's what people are going to give you opportunities in. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it. But yeah, it's every artist struggling with that whole same concept.
And you can always tell people, yeah, you are, because what's not a genre?
Right. Right, exactly. And there's so many, thanks to Netflix, there's so many subgenres and they're all genre, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's in writing and everything. People going, well, I write literary. I go, well, that's a genre.
Right. It's true.
So yeah, we've had a lot of conversations like this with writers that I work with and filmmakers and everything. Is that channeling in? Um,
Yep.
so we're coming up about the 30-minute mark here. So one of the things I always like to ask is if you were to have someone come to you now and like you've been involved in some pretty good sized projects, got to know a few people, and someone came to you and says, "I want to be a filmmaker." What piece of advice would you give them?
Two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice, and I think a lot of filmmakers you've probably heard at festivals and things say the same thing, it's go shoot something. I think even me, I fall into this trap sometimes. It's that you're going to make something that's so good that everyone's just going to come and hand you the keys to the castle and you're going to be able to make whatever you want for whatever budget you want. That's not reality. Like the reality that we work in is people are interested in people who can make money and make movies for less. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, we are in a world where there's so much content and everyone has a phone and everyone has a camera. Like, be creative and go do it. Stop saying you're going to do it and stop like waiting for someone to come and give you the green light and say you're going to go do this. Figure out a way to do it and go do it. That's part one. And then I think the second part of it would be that you really just need to trust your instincts. Everyone thinks that I grew up watching Quentin Tarantino, and it was like Quentin Tarantino made a movie and got this script to Harvey Keitel and got him in it, and then they went to a festival. So you see what other people do, and you think that's the road to success or that's the road to make it. There is no road to make it. There's a 19-year-old directing A24's next horror movie, like, and he made YouTube videos. Like, there's no footprint of following someone else's path. Your path is your path, and you make it however you make it. The one thing I would say about all of this, though, is you have to really enjoy the process. And I think a lot of times people fall into enjoying the result. And if you make something and it doesn't go well, you don't want to be a filmmaker anymore. Or if you make something and it goes well and people like it, you want to be a filmmaker because you love the attention and the success of people telling you you're great and here's more and do more. You have to really like the being on set, the grueling hours, the hard times, the coming up with creative ways to figure out how to shoot something when you don't have the money or the time to do it. You have to really, really respect and like the process because if you don't, you're gonna hate yourself. And the first second you say, maybe this isn't something I should be doing, then just quit right then and there because the people who succeed in this industry are the people who keep going, not the people who are like, even I mean, there's so many stories. Morgan Freeman, Harrison Ford, there's so many people that their career started in their 40s or 50s because they didn't really catch a project until late. Like, you just have to continue to work and love the stuff that you do. And if you keep loving what you're doing, good things will happen.
Yeah. So for yourself, now we've got the sequence out and you've done this other. What can we look forward to?
Yeah, so I actually produced like a sci-fi horror film called Imposters. It's Jessica Roth from Happy Death Day is the lead in that, and we're probably going to start a festival run next year for that. So that's the thing that it's coming out soon that everyone should look out for. It's a pretty fun movie, and we worked with a first-time filmmaker, and he did a great job on it. His name's Caleb Phillips. Then I am in between two projects right now that one is called The Hunted, which is a supernatural. I call it the supernatural slasher. That one I have a few people attached, and I'm looking for financing right now. And then the other one was the spoof that I told you called Corpse Creek, which is sort of the whodunit mass killer genre, kind of spoofing Scream in a way. So it's going to be one of those two. One of them is a much higher budget than the other one, so my assumption is I'll probably be doing the lesser budget, the smaller budget one. But that, and then, at any point, like we're very close to finishing the feature length version of the sequence. So hopefully we get an opportunity to go make that one relatively soon.
Okay, so I was able to see the sequence at FilmQuest. Uh, so whereabouts are you in your festival run? Is that getting near the end or are you just starting out? Where can people
No,
kind of see this film?
yeah, so we're getting near the end of this. I assume it's going to be on YouTube very soon. We're still in the process of figuring out where it's going to live, but it should be out there probably by the holidays. And then people will be able to see it. FilmQuest was the last festival that we went to, and kind of concluded our little festival run.
All right. Well, and congratulations on being nominated for the best horror short.
Thank
Uh,
you.
it's quite a tight competition at FilmQuest for the, as you
Yeah.
probably know, because I don't know if you heard the numbers or not, but there was close to like 3,500 short films submitted.
Wow.
to the
Yeah.
festival to
You
get
know,
in.
it's crazy. Like we did Scream Fest and we did Nightmare Fest in Ohio, and we won at Nightmare Fest. And I still like I say this all the time. Sure, it's great to win awards, but that's not what I'm doing this for. Like I felt like when I won the award for best overall short at Nightmare Fest, I felt like all the films in my block could have won the best film, and it's such a subjective thing. So it's great to be nominated and it's great to be recognized, but I don't really look into those things too much because I don't think that's a reflection of the people who made it and what the actual process is. It's just a little extra gratitude on top of it, but that doesn't mean the people who didn't win or didn't get nominated aren't as good or have great projects on their hands.
Okay, so if people are interested, like you said, and this is finishing up its festival run, where can they follow you to find out more information about what you're working on and what happens with the sequence?
Nice and easy. You can either go to joebandelli.com or you can go to Instagram, and my tag name is The Chosen Joey. I usually post a lot of stuff for the films, and you'll see a lot of things from the sequence on there. So I'm sure once we actually get a landing place for it, I'll be making announcements there.
Okay, sounds great. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you like what we're doing here with the interviews and the other things I do here on YouTube, please, subscribe to it because it helps in terms of the numbers of getting, the quality people like Joe here to be able to come and talk to us. And pass it along, like it, and share this out to the people that if they like this sort of stuff, share it to them because I think the independents are the way that things are just going really powerfully. So I'm going to give you one final thing here, Joe. Any final words you'd like to tell everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to thank you for this because, like I said, I'm a big part of the Hell House franchise, and we have an insane fan base of awesome people that have followed us over the years. And the thing that I know more than anything, especially in the independent space, that word of mouth, podcasts, interviews, all of these things help us spread our movies and help us get the word out there. So I want to thank you for having me on here and having other filmmakers on here because I think this is like a great place for us to talk about these things. And we wouldn't be able to do what we do if there weren't people like you out there that were talking about these things. So I want to thank you and anyone else who's been doing the media coverage and the press coverage for Film Quest because this is it's not a one person thing. It's a lot of hands that kind of get things out there, and we're all kind of artists, kind of figuring our own way out together. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will be writing a review of the sequence. It'll be going up on the blog, and I will cross link this and the interview here so you can get access to all of it. And so, again, thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.